It's nearly tampering time, free agency, and a lot more names added to the list. Players getting released and cut left and right. Texans swoop in and trade for a wide receiver before he's able to be released. And the Browns ownership declining meetings with star defensive lineman Myles Garrett. All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Probably turn my mic on here. Peacock and Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We love and appreciate all the everydayers out there. Hit subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. And if you're already subscribed, just hit the thumbs up on YouTube. If you're swinging by, let us know you're here just to say hi. And we love hearing from you in the YouTube comments as well. If you have any questions to get in on next week's mailbag episode. There's a lot of news this week. We didn't quite do a proper mailbag, but there's going to be tons of free agency news and comings and goings and storylines over the course of the next week. And we're already seeing a lot of free agency action, pre-free agency, as teams get ready for this things. And some teams still not quite cap compliant, so some moves still have to be done and in order for these teams to be ready to go and really start tampering proper when we get to Monday and then the opening of the league year and free agency on Wednesday. Today's episode, by the way, of Peacock and Williamson, brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. I want to start in Cleveland because this is a huge storyline, and it's a big battle, and it's a Hall of Fame player in his 20s that is available. I've talked about this on Locked On 49ers, Matt, with Myles Garrett, and it sounds like the 49ers are going a different direction than all in, spending money, spending draft picks. So a couple weeks ago, I was like, go get Myles Garrett. It doesn't.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
You change your plans for someone like Myles Garrett. And I compared it to when Reggie White went from the Philadelphia Eagles to the Green Bay Packers in the 90s. That's the kind of impact Myles Garrett can make for your football team. So whatever your plans are, you change those plans if someone like Myles Garrett at that position is available. And he wants to be gone. The Browns say they don't want to trade him. So a standoff is ensuing right now in Cleveland. But apparently Myles Garrett wanted to have a meeting with ownership, and ownership declined the meeting? How is that possible?
That's what's being reported, is he reached out to ownership, and they said, talk to the GM. And I don't have time. I'm not interested. It's not my job. Whatever. However they handled it. And just had a really good conversation on Locked On NFL. Ross is filling in for Wig, but we did a whole segment on this just about how this team and this organization lacks self-awareness. They still think they're a contender. Garrett asking for a trade should have been the straw that pushed them into tank them and finally get into picks and trade the Joel Bitonio's and Wards and get every pick you can and start over. And I'm not a tanking kind of guy, but the last three drafts have just crippled you so much. And instead, they extend Watson again. He's like an $88 million cap hit next year. This just shows that they think they're going to sign Kirk Cousins and win the North and be a Super Bowl contender, and that Myles Garrett's going to be thrilled. He's never going to play another down for the Browns. I firmly believe that. And could you imagine, your star player, an all-time great expansion team Brown player right there with Joe Thomas, reaches out to ownership? And I made the example. I'm like, you should send a helicopter to his front yard and bring him in, or your private jet down to Texas and bring him up, or invite him into your home and bake him cookies and pull out your best scotch and cigars and hang out with them. And let's just talk like men here. I don't got time.
But break out the hot dog roller, right?
The hot dog, yeah. If you really want to show him a good time, right?
Whatever he's into. Matt Williamson, you break out the hot dog roller in the martinis, right? It's a rudderless ship. And if you're wondering how an organization can be so bad for so long, and you're wondering how an organization could do the move that we've seen with Deshaun Watson, you're seeing it. You're seeing it in real time, which is exactly why Myles Garrett doesn't want to be there.
Right. He knows too. He's a really smart, self-aware person. Right.
And it's the exact time ownership needs to step in and do something about their organization to make it a successful organization.
Yeah. How many quarterbacks have they burned through? And, you know,
and like the head coach and GM are dead men walking as far as their jobs go with the Browns.
Yeah.
No, of course they don't want to trade their best player because they're going to just get fired quicker because they're going to suck next year.
They're going to win 2 games. Right.
Get fired anyway. You can't even let them make decisions like that if you're ownership.
No, they go your baby, your team. And you and I talk about this a lot. And the older I get, I talk about it more and more. But for some reason, Wig and I bring it up, it seems like every Friday. There are 32 organizations in this NFL, and they all are worth billions, and they all will make money no matter how bad you are at your job. See the Washington franchise in last ownership, and frankly, the Browns aren't all that much different, apparently. But it's a no-lose situation. But I can't stress enough that these are 32 different companies run 32 different ways, and some of them are way better than others. You know, like on the show earlier, we segued into the Zach Bond contract and just how different the Eagles and the Browns are in terms of their self-awareness. And they're the 2 most cash spending teams in the league, but one of it does them well and one of it does it extremely poorly, you know?
I hope for Myles Garrett's sake, he's able to figure out a way to get out of there and we get to see him playing playoff football and meaningful football for one of the other 31 franchises in the NFL. And something needs to be done in Cleveland to get that thing right. And they had the perfect opportunity with this that gets them off the hook with Myles Garrett. Like Myles Garrett gave them an opportunity to get off the hook.
Right.
And try to
did them a favor.
Right.
And they didn't see it.
Get a bunch of draft picks, get out from under and like, first of all, whoever was involved in like, and I don't know what the behind the scenes were. Was this an ownership driven move? Is ownership just AWOL and it was, GM and head coach driven move to bring in Deshaun Watson? Whoever was in charge of bringing in the Deshaun Watson move, if you're ownership for the Cleveland Browns, that person should have been fired yesterday.
Right. And that was 100% ownership. Right. The other 31 owners were very unhappy about that.
And so if it is ownership driven, then that stinks. You probably need to print orange T-shirts that have the word "sell" on them. And if you're a Browns fan, right, like this paper bag over the head, like that. It's frustrating. I feel bad for Browns fans, man, because
it's brutal.
There's not going to be a way out of it if this is how the organization is run.
And it's a great fan base that's been treated really poorly every step of the way. And back to Garrett real quick. Don't you agree that this is going to be the best time to get the most you can for Myles Garrett? I mean, because all these teams have the most cap space they're going to have. You want picks in this draft. You don't want to do it after the draft. You know what I mean? These teams are like, say it's the Lions, the Bills, whoever. We're to go all in. Like you said, it's a Reggie White type of guy. We're interested. This is a franchise-changing move. But the Browns aren't picking up the phone. I'll just call Trey Hendrickson and said, "Oh well, I'm out of the market. I'm done." Like I just say this is the most you'd get for him.
Pre-draft is when you make this move for sure.
Yeah, and teams are anxious to build their teams, and they have the most cap room they're going to have before they start spending and all that good stuff.
And I would buy the argument that maybe future picks could be just as valuable. So potentially post-draft. Sure. But it's just going to be probably more difficult, and you could turn the current picks into more future picks and more draft capital. And, there's a lot of ways that you could slice this. But draft picks and a new vision is really the only way to fix it. And so
it is. And I don't think they see it at all. I mean, they
clearly don't.
I mean, it made it sound like Joel Bitonio decided to come back. So we're back in this thing. We're going to win the Super Bowl. Like, what are you talking about? He should trade him too.
Disrespectful to Myles Garrett has to be more dug in on this Friday morning than he was even before. Be like, you want to take a meeting with me, ownership? See ya.
I'm done.
My house is up for sale. My locker is cleaned out. You're not going to see me there again. So you figure it out. I'm gone.
I'll bet pretty much everything I own. He does not play another game for the Browns.
We'll see how convicted Myles Garrett is about that, how hard of ball he plays. He's a mild-mannered guy for the most part. He cannot be happy, though, about how things are going, and even less happy now than he already was, and he already wanted out of Cleveland. Christian Kirk going to the Houston Texans, swooping in last minute and crushing Matt Williamson's dreams of getting a wide receiver on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and a whole bunch more names added to the list of free agents that are about to hit the market next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And it's no longer NFL season, but you can still bet on the NFL, bet on the next Super Bowl champion. Tons of NFL draft props growing all the time. Some off-season free agent props and player movement props and trade props, and so many ways to bet on the NFL. But man, it is NBA season right now. And, college basketball tournament is coming as well. And when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel. And with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off, you can bet on that fourth quarter comeback. And the app is super easy to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. And it's so fun to play along with the games in a live situation. You can play same-game parlays and combine those bets for an even bigger payout. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So Christian Kirk was going to get it released by the Jacksonville Jaguars. They've done some other releasing, or are to do some other releasing as well for pass catchers on that football team. But Christian Kirk actually is not going to be a free agent now, because the Houston Texans have swooped in last minute before they could release him and have made a trade so that they don't have to fight any other teams for the services of Christian Kirk in free agency. So now Christian Kirk going to the Houston Texans. Interesting move. Is this a savvy move by the Houston Texans, Matt?
I think it's a really interesting move on a lot of levels. So again, I'm not brokenhearted that Christian Kirk's not going to be a Steeler. The world will still spin. But my partner and I on our Steelers show said 3 days ago, I would give up a 7th round pick right now for him and eat his contract just so I don't have to fight with the other teams. And it becomes public knowledge. The Jags, they made a lot of moves. They cut Ingram. They cut a bunch of dudes, as they always do. They rent guys for 2 years and then cut them, and then sign another big contract and cut them, and blah, blah, blah. The cycle, goes on and on. But I am a little shocked that more teams don't do this. That his contract's not wonderful, but it's not great. And it tells me to send him in the division, any 7th round pick would have got it done. That's the last team they probably want to send them to. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, if anyone else offers a 7, I'm sure they take it. Don't you think? I mean, it's a late 7 too.
Is a late 7th round pick even worth helping your division opponent? Wouldn't you rather just?
I know. I thought about that too.
Yeah.
So you mentioned to start the show that there are some teams that aren't yet salary cap compliant, and I actually thought it was the Texans. I think they are now, because they cut a couple people too. They cut Shaq Mason. They weren't for a while there after this Kirk move, but it's the Chiefs, Falcons, Bills, and of course the Saints. But real quick on the Texans, they were up against it, but they still thought, this is a guy that is a number 2 for us. We're not going to bring back Diggs. Dell came out yesterday, Tank Dell, that he's getting surgery today, finally, on that ACL. It's been that bad they couldn't get surgery. So he's going to probably miss the entire season. So be proactive and go get some pass catchers that you're familiar with. And I give the Texans credit for being aggressive.
Jonathan Allen, another player that's being, that's not surprising. And, they were just kind of all these guys. It's like, hey, we're going to release this guy. So can we swing a trade? Can we swing a trade? Can we swing a trade? No, all right.
Give me anything.
Right. So, and we're seeing more and more and more and more of these. But as strong as the league is, the salary cap going up huge, everyone and their mother's getting cut by all these NFL teams, Matt. We got to do a study on how many contracts see the last year of the deal, because
that's a good point.
Players either get cut or they get a new deal and they get an extension before they see the end of their current deal. Like what percentage, just off the top of your head, would you say NFL contracts play out the last year of a contract? What percentage?
50? Is that crazy? Is it less?
I would say 5%.
Like, okay. I mean, I would say,
like, literally, I can't think of one contract that went through the end of the deal right now off the top of my head.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you'd have to look at this free agent class and say who signed a second deal and actually became a free agent, not got cut.
Right.
And I'm not talking about rookie deals. Rookie deals, they have no hope, obviously, or fifth-year options or franchise tags or all that stuff. But how many dudes played out their second contract after becoming a free agent and saw every dollar of it and every minute of it?
Yeah, and most
like
of them,
none. You're right.
You see a lot of these, and a lot of them are like 1-year deals that they're just finishing anyway because they got cut 2 years ago or whatever. You know, it's like,
yeah.
It's less than 50% for sure. It's not a high.
It's definitely less than 50. You're right.
So anytime we see the next contract, let's lop off the last year of it, and then we'll calculate what the contract really is, and then maybe even lop off 2 years of it, depending how long the contract is, and then have a better idea of what actually the contract is that the player got. But
I retweeted something Adam Schefter put out today about, here's a long list of players that have been, told they're going to be let go. I mean, Devontae Adams, Joey Bosa, Ingram, Lockett, Slay, Bradbury, Hargrave, Minshew. I mean, on and on and on and on. But the list is as long of player X, go find us a trade partner. The Metcalf stuff is going on. We're honoring your trade request. The Trey Hendrickson things are going on. I mean, this is a new way, that's
the newest way, is the allowing players to seek trade.
Yeah.
That never used to happen. And teams and GMs are much less willing to play hardball than they used to be as well. It's kind of like, whatever. Sure. I don't know. Go find it. I don't care.
Do they just think these guys are more replaceable, or we had a really good conversation yesterday, I think it was, about a lot of these receivers don't see the end of their contracts either. I mean, there's a really worth investing in, the tier 2 guys or the really good Pro Bowl type receivers. They get moved a lot, and those type of guys too. I mean, I think it's all fascinating right now.
You sent me a list of free agent offensive linemen curated by Brandon Thorne, right? It's not a great list of offensive linemen, right?
No.
And you look at the offensive tackle list, and I think the number 2 or 3 guy is like a 40-year-old broken down
Tyron Smith.
It's like, God,
number 2 is Dan Moore, who the Steelers really want nothing to do with. He's just 26 and he's a left tackle. That's what he's got going for.
And go look at the list of available via trade or free agent wide receivers, and there's 100 of them. Right?
And there's 100 of them. Yeah.
Like this goes into the conversation we talked about earlier this week about the scarcity. Like, there is no wide receiver scarcity in the NFL, at least compared to other premium positions like offensive line and edge rushers and defensive linemen, right?
100%.
Offensive tackles. And so maybe the league is learning a little something about where the money should be spent. And if you look at the NFL draft and you look at clean prospects, like even if he's a guard, Will Campbell and Armand Mimbo went crazy at the combine.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys might not get out of the top 10 because offensive line is a lot harder to find, especially the offensive tackles. Defensive line, a lot harder to find than wide receivers. So do we start to see a correction in the wide receiver market around the NFL? And we're seeing so many wide receivers that are either cut or available in trade by teams.
Yeah, and I know it's kind of an anomaly, and it's kind of funny to laugh at now. But it's our running backs. Do they matter now? But Saquon Barkley's contract he signed in free agency last year is basically the same as Gabe Davis's that they signed. That's kind of funny. What are we talking about here?
When you look at it that way,
right.
Running backs are devalued, but we've got this guy who's like a god tier player, and this guy who's like. Just a
dude, right? That's
right. So
3rd round pick who can get you Gabe Davis production, right?
So it is pretty insane when you look at it through that lens as well, or what kind of an offensive lineman you're going to be able to get in free agency for that same Saquon Barkley money. We're talking about, what'd Saquon get? $19 million a year or something, right? That's the reported number. I don't know what the real number is and how much of it's guaranteed, but these running back contracts are, which is smart by the teams, and the Eagles are a smart run organization. They're shorter term contracts. Saquon blows out his knee next year, they can cut him, or whatever. So it's not like a long-term expenditure where it's going to hurt you to have a short-term, even high-dollar running back sign. But for a high-dollar running back, he's getting what I'm seeing 49ers free agent left guard Aaron Banks might get in free agency, like $18 million a year. I mean,
he's a fine player. He's okay.
Or Saquon Barkley, right? Even a devalued running back, it's still easy decision to make there.
And I think you and I have had this exact conversation the last two trade deadlines. And you think it's hard to find a tackle now, but imagine when the trade deadline rolls around and all the injuries have set in and teams aren't dealing their guys. But as you always bring up around trade deadline time, there's like 15 different receivers you could get. It might cost you a little.
And zero starting caliber offensive tackle.
Right. It's pretty hard to get a center or guard, but it's impossible to get a tackle at the trade deadline,
And you can and that's the other thing and that's why for me, it's clear tiers when it comes to positional values. And wide receiver is after defensive lineman, tackle, or end, and it's for sure after offensive tackle. We can talk about interior guys because you can kind of find tough, smart, developable interior offensive linemen a lot easier than
you can
tackle.
They walk the planet at least,
And corners and like defensive back seven guys that can cover are starting to become more valuable and more rare because of what you have to do everything in this.
That's what I was going to say too. We talked about the Zach Bond thing quite a bit yesterday. But even the last 24 hours, there's been 3 off-the-ball linebackers that have signed extensions too. They're not huge names, but an every down linebacker to me might be worth more than a wide receiver too. Every down guy, not the thumper or the 220-pound guy that can't play the run, but a high-quality linebacker that never comes off the field, or a pretty, not Gabe Davis, someone better than that. A decent receiver. There's not many of those linebackers out there right now either.
Andrew Whitworth, former offensive tackle, said something very interesting, and I can't tell if he's kind of subtweeting one of his former teams in the Rams or his other former team in the Bengals. I want to get to this. This is fascinating about what we're talking about in offseason movement, free agency, negotiations. Next. So, Matt, we didn't even talk about this off the air, but it hit me, and I'd totally forgotten about it. It's something I want to bring up. And this is what Andrew Whitworth had to say. You can draw conclusions about which team he's talking about, because the Rams kind of did exactly what he's talking about right now. And I think he might be talking more about his former team, which I think he butted heads a little bit when it came to contracts and stuff in the Cincinnati Bengals. This is what Andrew Whitworth had to say. Why is everyone so dramatic? A player demands to be paid blank. I don't feel good about paying blank, says the team. I say, well, I hold your rights. So if blank will only make you happy, go out there and explore your real options. Come back to me with a number other teams are willing to pay you while keeping in mind what you mean to me. So my compensation needs to be included. Now, we can have a full, transparent conversation about your worth to them, to me, and maybe what it means to just stay. And he goes on to say, this is a league-wide lack of logic. All I hear guys talk about is wanting clarity and transparency. Now we freak out about it. You're worth X? Cool. Show me. Then we can talk. Not going to negotiate against myself. And I've been saying this too. And I think it's fascinating. And he tweeted this suspiciously close to when the Trey Hendrickson news broke, which happened right after we recorded our podcast yesterday. And we'd kind of talked about the Bengals a little bit and how the Max Crosby contract is really bad for the Bengals and keeping Trey Hendrickson. And then immediately the Bengals saw that contract and were like, yeah, okay, go ahead and explore a trade, Trey Hendrickson, right? And so we just saw this happen with Matthew Stafford. And guess what? Matthew Stafford found the market. Everybody knew what the market was. The team did, the player did, the agent did, the opposing teams that were trying to get him did. And he stayed with the Rams. And I think we could probably learn a lesson there, especially with an older player, a guy in his 30s maybe. And I'm with Andrew Whitworth 100% on this. Everyone's big boy, put your big boy pants on. The fans, you don't have to freak out about everything either. And okay, we're we hit a roadblock in negotiations. Let's find it. Let's find the real value. What is your real value? Because if your real value is way more to another team than it is to us, man, maybe we're out of whack. But guess what? That team's got to send us draft picks too, because that's how much you value the guy. And that's where I've been preaching that with Brock Purdy and the 49ers negotiations, where it seems like they're $10 million a year apart potentially. Get it done now. You don't have to let this thing go into training camp with holdouts. Find your value.
It's kind of like you're checking out the grocery store and the can of soup doesn't have a label on it, and the person checking you out doesn't know. It's like price check, aisle 3. You know, that's gonna be a price check on DK Metcalf. I just want to throw it out there. Is it 79 cents or 99 cents for the can of soup? You know, and the way Whitworth said that was perfect. And I will tell you, when you talk to people in the league, way more guys are available via trade than you think. And not even like crazy overpay. Like, I mean, I know everyone has a price. You could give them 9 first-round picks or whatever. But there aren't many dudes that I can't trade him. You know what I mean?
It's kind of the thing. And this definitely happens with the draft. And I think that's why there's so much secrecy with the draft. Well, first of all, teams don't want to have egg on their face. And especially there's not going to be any more of that offseason hard knock stuff because the Giants looked so stupid last year. No team is going to want to do that, right? And teams don't even want people to see their draft boards post-draft and all that. But the other thing is teams want, like the Titans right now might be 100% convinced in who they're going to draft, but they still want everybody in the league to call them about a trade. And teams always say that, like, call us. We want you to call us about anything. We are willing to listen on anybody is kind of how GMs are wired. Even if they know they wouldn't trade a guy, they want you to call anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like a fantasy football trade almost. Like someone makes you an offer, you're like, it's a terrible offer, but I'll counter with something I like. I mean, at least somebody called.
I can't remember if we talked about this, but that was the very first thing I thought of when the big Luka NBA trade happened. The Mavericks and Luka Doncic, a young star player, to the first Lakers, of all, the team that's like, man, how do the Lakers always end up with these types of players, right? And didn't talk to anybody else in the league. Everyone who plays fantasy football has been through that, where all of a sudden there's some trade that happens, and you're like, why didn't you tell other?
I would have given you more than that, or
way more than that. You got hosed in this trade. If you're going to trade star player, you're going to trade Saquon Barkley, you could get a lot for him. So let the other owners know, and you could get a lot more than this one guy who just fleeced you behind the scenes and you didn't talk to anybody else about it. So the first thing I thought of was fantasy football when I saw that trade.
Yeah, it's funny. And I'm sure it's like, well, we don't want the world to know that Luka can be had because he's our franchise guy on all the billboards, but he can be had, you know. So I'm not going to shop him because I don't want him to know, but you could have got a lot more, you know, I mean, obviously. I mean, I think that I wish I had a better grasp on what trade talks are really like and the behind the scene conversations people have. And this is a very outdated way of looking at it, but I always thought it'd been awesome. Like back in my day, 20 years ago when I was with the Browns, there should be an NFL chat room that only one, you know, there's a secret code that every organization can allow one person to go in, and you go in there and be like, Mahomes is on the block. We're the only ones that know, but I'm the, you know what I mean? Like I'm shopping number one, you know, right.
Don't reply to this thread, but here's my phone number.
Right. You know where to find me. It's a cone of silence, but this guy can be on the block, and I want everyone to know it. You know?
I think partly where that happens is like at the combine, whether you're putting out stuff behind the scenes or to agents or to the Schefters. Like you leak a thing to Schefter, like, oh, so-and-so team has gotten calls on a player, and the team that hasn't called about him yet are like, wait a second, I should be calling about that player. Other teams are calling about that guy. I'm going to call about that guy.
I'm calling too, right? Yeah. And he called the GM.
Reality, nobody called that, but the team put that out there so Schefter could put out the bat signal to let him know that they should be calling about that player.
Like the most hilarious one is the Steelers are calling about Trevor Lawrence. Like they don't even have a GM.
They don't have a GM. Like, you want $100 million in dead money? Like that one doesn't.
Right. Like what is this one? So believe half of what you're seeing. And as you said, this is really lying season too. But wait till the draft picks up. It's really lying season.
Oh yeah, it's so everything. You have to look at it through that lens. Like, okay, and it's always so obvious if a team or an agent
who leaked it
is the one that leaked it to Schefter or Rappaport or whatever. It's like, okay, well, that came from the team. That came like who stands to gain from this? And that's where, and especially with the draft, when it comes to that, like all you're going to hear from the Titans is that they're interested in everything because they want everybody who's also interested in that thing to call them. They're going to be interested in Abdul Carter, and they're going to bring him in, and they're going to be interested in. And first of all, you got to do due diligence. Clearly, if you're a good franchise anyway.
Right. You might trade down to 3 and take him anyway. Yeah, right.
We're gonna hear, and Shador is going to be in the mix, and Cam Ward is going to be in the mix, and you want teams to call about whatever it is, the thing that they want, because like the Browns at 2 or the Patriots at 4 might have different ideas about who they want to fall to them, and the Titans want you to call them about potentially trading up to get that.
Yeah, 100%. So I don't know. It's fun to have this conversation on Friday because, boy, on Monday the league's going to look a lot different when we get back at it.
Tampering begins Monday, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to report, even though we're going to go live before tampering begins right when we usually record. So we might have to wait a little bit to see exactly
that works.
What happens with the official legal tampering period. We'll probably hear about some illegal tampering before that happens anyway. Real quick, here was the quote from Trey Hendrickson through Adam Schefter.
Oh, yeah.
Quote, "It's been an honor and a privilege to represent Cincinnati over the last 4 years. I love this city and organization. I appreciate the privilege of now being allowed to explore my options." Do you have a team for Hendrickson? Real quick, just quick answer here out the door. And should the Bengals just be like, all right, we're going to suck on defense anyway, so let's just make our offense. Let's even add another offensive piece in the draft, and let's try to score 50 points a game.
I kind of feel that's the way they're going to do it. They're going to trade it. I mean, that's what they were last year to some degree. The Bills, the Lions. We know the Bengals are the hardest team to trade with in the league, though, too.
Yeah. I mean, so basically, all the teams that would be in on Garrett.
Yeah. I mean, would you be interested in San Fran?
I would have been. Now that the 49ers feel like they're going to be a seller and not a buyer.
Yeah.
If you're believing all the reports locally, and it's just evidence mounting that that's going to be the way that the 49ers go, which is fascinating. Like the all-in era is over for the 49ers apparently, and they didn't have a ring, and I don't see how you get better. Interesting team as well. Anyway,
Buffalo's one that I would really be interested in.
Buffalo's got to be like, maybe even if it hurts you in the future, they got to try to get over that hump, right?
Yeah. Give me a big-time defensive player. They tried with Von Miller, and he got hurt, and
Let us know what you think. Get involved in next week's mailbag. Of course, a lot to happen when free agency begins next week, and we've got it covered for you every single day here on Peacock and Williamson. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. And by the way, for your second listen, tons of great shows. Your team is covered right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And our guys Locked On NFL Draft, holding it down. Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now the season over, offseason, it's offseason time. It's draft season time. So you can find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube and wherever you find your podcasts, all the same places you find Peacock and Williamson.